Dr. Phil, did you have a light? Did I see a light or a no? Okay. Anything on this side? We're going to let you off scot-free. I can't believe that.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do?
What was our
Carrie,
joke
I'm sorry, I didn't
If
see your light.
nobody else wants to participate, I guess I will. Seth, I know you're big on free speech. Babylon B wouldn't exist if you didn't have freedom of speech, and I'm full supportive of that. You said platforms are an issue, which I assume you're referring to X. Are you saying that Elon and heads of platforms need to censor speech that they determine as anti-Semitic? And if so, by what definition do they censor? Would that definition censor this verse from the Bible? The Jews who killed both the Lord Jesus and their own prophets and drove us out and don't please God and are contrary to all men. 1 Thessalonians 2:14.
I think you may have
I think he should be removed. I think he should be removed.
Excuse me. We will not have outbursts from the audience. If there's a further outburst, I will ask you to leave.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, you're out. Please escort this gentleman. We will not be interrupted.
Thank you. We're having a discussion. It's very important.
I think you may have misheard what I said about platforms. I said platforms are not the problem. Promotion is the problem. So what I advocate for, I actually personally advocated for Nick Fuentes to be reinstated on X when Elon took it over. Not because I like what he has to say, but because I love that he has the right to say it. So even these ideas that I steadfastly oppose, I think the solution to them is to push back on them. Better speech, more speech, good speech in response to bad speech. So you may have just misunderstood what I was saying there about the platforms.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. And then, Leo, thank you so much for being here. What anti-Semitic actions have taken place? I've heard a lot of examples of harmful words and protests, but aren't we free in this nation to have the right to protest, protected by the First Amendment? As I said, Seth, love free speech, as do I. So words are protected. What I'm concerned about is what further legislation do we need around free speech?
Well, first of all, let me be very clear. I've been a civil rights attorney 35 years. I am a strong believer in free speech. You will not have me challenge anyone's right to speak. I support Seth on that. But when you match speech with conduct, criminal conduct, such as blocking access to someone's right to go to school, along with the speech, then you cross a line where there may be a criminal activity where the affirmative defense of free speech no longer exists. We had a lot of discussion about a school that I'm embarrassed that I went to, UCLA Law School. We heard what was going on. I was sitting there cringing because it was true. And we had people who were block access. Speech, I'm all good for that. Going back to what I originally said, all those charges in which the line was crossed, where it went from speech to conduct, believe it or not, the local prosecutor dismissed all those charges, the criminal charges. So that's why I'm saying this problem is really on a local level. But I will support anyone's right on speech. It's when they match it with conduct that might cross the line and would be considered criminal in and of itself.
But aren't there already laws to protect that?
Well, you never heard me say in my presentation, there are existing laws that should be utilized. I'm not talking about creating new laws.
So as the chairman of whatever
the task force.
The task force, yes, thank you. What do you recommend as far as further laws?
I mentioned it today. Well, first of all, Title VI is a funding law that should be used. Title VII is very critical. Civil Rights Act 1964-65, which allows employees who are facing discriminatory misconduct to seek action. Even union organizations can be used for Title VII. So those were the two that I was referring to. And what is a great weapon, which I have learned, is that Jewish faculty members in public unions are being denied right to participate. That's a Title VII action. So what I'm saying is, under the rubric of what is currently in existence, civil rights laws, I think rights of Jewish Americans can be defended, can be executed properly. And if I was making any recommendation, there should be litigation under those two sections, Title VI and Title VII.
Thank you. And then one last question for Seth. I know you were at the Hamptons with Charlie Kirk. I know he was labeled an anti-Semite at the very end. Would you like to condemn him being labeled an anti-Semite?
Charlie was not an anti-Semite. Charlie
you.
loved the Jewish people dearly, and
I
so
agree.
I think that's very silly. Charlie was invited and was open to having debates about anything, including whether or not we should be supporting Israel, for example, in the current war. He's open to having those conversations, and he was very strongly irritated by people making those accusations at him by simply saying that we should be willing to have these conversations, because he didn't view that as crossing the line into anti-Semitism. Neither do I, up to a point. There are people who try to conceal their anti-Semitism under the guise of merely criticizing Israel, and you can see they're not merely criticizing Israel. But Charlie wasn't an anti-Semite, not even close, the opposite.
Eric?
Thank you. Thank you. I spoke to Charlie about this stuff, and he was trying to have a substantive conversation, and he was clearly not an anti-Semite, but he was an anti-dentite. That's a Seinfeld joke. If you don't get that joke, look it up. My relationship with Charlie was based on our love of Seinfeld, so I just want to clarify that, first of all. Regarding what Dr. Spaulding was saying about ideology, it's interesting to me. I've always felt that all of our problems, it's ultimately about the culture. The law can only do so much. You can make laws and make laws. We heard earlier, you can have a law, and if the cops aren't doing something, who cares what the law is? So ultimately, we have to educate young people in particular, but older people as well. Our founding, I just finished writing a 600-page book on the American Revolution, and when I started writing it, I was 10 years old. When I started writing it, I honestly didn't understand how clearly Christian, I would even go so far as to say Reformation, Puritan Christian, the founders were. Now, I say that just because it's dramatically true, and it is not taught in our schools. And we have been dealing with, the reason we're in this mess right now in the culture is because for decades we've not been teaching civics and the basics of who we are as a people. You cannot get America, you cannot get a love of religious liberty and a love of liberty unless you understand where that comes from and what it means. And I would say, speaking as a Christian, I don't agree with certain theologies as a Christian, but as a Christian, I would die defending the right of people to have those theologies. And that is a Christian value. That's not an Islamic value. And we have to have that conversation in America about what does it mean to be an American, what are the limits of religious liberty, obviously, but we can't pretend we've fallen into relativism where we're no longer able to have intelligent conversations. You cannot sustain liberty or religious liberty unless you have an understanding of the founding and of the mind of the founders. And if you begin to pretend that, oh, it's about the Enlightenment, it's not Enlightenment rationalism, ladies and gentlemen. People didn't come here from Europe so they could pursue Enlightenment rationalism. It came out of their Christian convictions. But I say this because ultimately what we're talking about here, it's a hatred of the West. It's a hatred of the God of the West. It's a hatred of the God of the Bible. That's at the heart of this. And so in this 250th year, which President Trump on the stage declared, it's officially the supercentennial, in case you didn't get that memo. The 250th, we don't have we don't have a term like bicentennial, so he's calling it the supercentennial. But the point is, this is the year that we in America have to talk publicly about what does it mean to be an American, who we are as an Americans. This isn't some Enlightenment, rationalist, neocon project. This is fundamentally a biblical project. It's an extension of the Sinai covenant. All of the founders understood this. And so as I hear us talking about this, you cannot sustain America and you cannot sustain a love of religious liberty and a respect for people with whom you disagree unless you understand this. And it comes out of the Bible, and we have to say that publicly. And I don't know how we say that in K through 12, but we did for 200 years say that in public schools in America. We taught it simply because it was our history. And something has happened. It kind of came into the culture in 1968. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, the lack of courage of academic leaders standing up to the Marxist lunacy that was breaking the campuses at that time. And I think that if we do not understand these things and teach these things, we can make all the laws we want, and we need to make laws. But the first thing that I would recommend the President of the United States to do is to absolutely defund practically every penny that taxpayers are giving to higher education, because higher education has become a breeding ground for every wicked ideology. And I was at Yale in the early 80s, and it was so strong in the early 80s when I was there. I was astonished. I'd never encountered it. And so I think we need to the extent that we have the power of the purse, to defund almost all higher education, because they are not even, it's not even close to what they're doing. The harm they're doing goes way beyond what we saw following October 7th. And so I just felt that I needed to say that it's about the culture, but I would love any of you to respond, but particularly Seth Dillon and Dr. Spalding, since you work in the cultural space.
We went from no lights to lots of lights. Did you want to make a comment, Dr. Spalding? Then we'll get to our...
I'm happy to just say at this point that was part of the reason I mentioned America 250, because I do think it's an opportunity to educate at all levels. And we have to bring the positive over and over again. We have to bring the factual over and over again. And then I'd like to hear what some more people have to say before we might continue the conversation.
I'm not sure which order, but Reverend Franklin, did I see your light there for a minute?
Well, yeah, it comes on and off.
That's why I wanted to get to you. I don't want to miss what you have to say.
Just to be clear, the accusations that the Jews killed Jesus, they didn't kill him. He's alive. He's not dead. His tomb is empty. But I would like to, after 9/11, Mr. Chairman, there were the hijackers were mostly Saudis, and they flew their airplanes into the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, and in the name of Islam. So after 9/11, Saudi Arabia, to improve its image, started funding on university campuses centers for Islamic understanding or studies. And that funding has created an issue now for our country after 20-some years, because those centers now have grown, and they get money from other Gulf states that pour huge amounts of money into our universities. And that has a very negative impact on our education. And it's anti-Semitic. And so I think maybe we need a task force to follow the money and what is that produced. But I would just dare to say that there needs to be a study as to who's been influencing our universities to turn our universities and our students to be anti-Semitic.
Every now and then I hear that inner voice. God told me to call on you. He just need that to be said. So a great comment.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, go ahead, Seth.
One of the first things you said, the Jews didn't kill Jesus, he's alive. Agree with that, yes. He lives. There were Jewish leaders who were calling for Jesus' crucifixion. There were also Jewish followers of Jesus. His disciples were Jewish. The authors of the New Testament, with the exception maybe of Luke, Acts, were Jewish. So there's two sides of that. And what does it have to do with Jews today? What guilt do they share in that? So Those are, I think, important points to make. One other quick comment, too, if I could, on the in your initial question to me, you mentioned the Hamptons retreat. I think it's important for me to say something about this because nobody would have even known about this. Was a private retreat. The only reason that anybody knows about it is because a very prominent and loud anti-Semite wanted to make a big deal out of it to try to suggest that Jews were at this retreat, Zionists, and maybe she would use that terminology. Sometimes she switches back and forth. But Candace Owens was claiming that people there blackmailed Charlie to try to keep him in support of Israel, offered him a ton of money. My name was mentioned, Bill Ackman's name. People were dragged through the mud. I've received death threats, multiple death threats. One man out in Texas was arrested for threatening to kill me and my family as a result of these lies that were told about me. This is the price that you pay if you defend Israel, if you defend Jews. The people who hate them, the anti-Zionists, the anti-Semites, will do everything that they can to smear and destroy you and intimidate you and try to get you to shut up and go and become quiet. And I would encourage other people that even facing that cost, especially because there's that cost, we need to be courageous and speak out.